Please give a warm Georgia Tech welcome to Dan Mathews.
What we learn at summer camp, the things we do at summer camp, it's also, if you remember back your first time going to summer camp, how nervous you might have been as you pulled through the gates of that camp, because there were just lots of things that you didn't know how they were going to get taken care of. You were used to having your mom, your dad take care of those things. Well, for the children that we serve, their illness or disability often prevents them from going to a traditional summer camp and having that traditional summer camp experience. There are several camps like ours throughout the country, but what I wanted to talk about today was collaboration, and how we as a nonprofit collaborate with now 65 different nonprofits across the state of Georgia, and how making that collaboration successful is a long relationship building process. There are lots of collaborations going on in the world today. I was really impressed and interested in the news that Amazon and Berkshire Hathaway are collaborating to create a new health system for their employees. So collaboration is really, I think, for the future. Certainly in the nonprofit world, most grantors are looking at who are you collaborating with, who are you working with. And so that's really what I wanted to focus my talk on today. But I want you to have an understanding of what camp is first. So this is our mission statement and our vision statement. I'm not going to read through them, but the thing I do want to point out is our vision statement, which was created during our first strategic plan, which was about 10 years ago. And it was, for us, a sea change, because we had been working with our partners as renters. There was a landlord-tenant relationship. It was not a collaboration. It was very much that sort of tenant relationship. But our vision was that we were going to be a vital network of closely aligned partners who collaborate. We put that on paper, and man, it looked great. We were very excited about this. And then came the details. And working with all of these different partners, starting with 7 in 1993 up to now 65, and the dynamics of those relationships to be able to achieve that collaboration to provide the year-round programs was something that was a challenge for us, and frankly remains a challenge, and I think will continue to be. As long as there are people involved, it's going to be a challenge. So I want to show a quick video that will give you sort of an overview of camp and of some of the stories, show you some of the kids playing. So this will at least be able to show you a little bit of camp.
There are so many great stories.
I went out to the ropes course.
We were doing the nature ropes course.
We had a young girl who was diagnosed with cancer who lost her arm.
She's up on the catwalk.
And she got to the climbing tower and said, when I signed up for this, I forgot I only had one arm.
Well, sure enough, she was so weak physically that she could only get about 3 steps up the rope ladder, and was saying that she just couldn't get any further.
She didn't think she could do it.
And she got scared, and she had been up there for maybe 15 minutes, and she did not want to come down.
Well, the next thing you know, her counselor came over and grabbed the bottom of the rope and held on to it and started yelling at the girl, "You can't be afraid of this. You are battling cancer. This rope ladder is nothing."
Nobody could get her down. Nobody could get her to move. Nobody could get her to do anything.
We were able to get her suited up and encourage her, and she got to the top of the climbing tower and rang the bell.
Tears flowing, laughter spreading.
And that's what camp's about. It's about teaching kids, not only are they doing things that we think are pretty impressive, but we're often changing their minds about what's possible with their lives.
The Camp Twin Lakes story is an amazing one.
We're really about not just helping children, which we help thousands of them, but helping organizations we help them add a very important component to what they're already doing, which is a camping experience for the children they serve.
They were moving from site to site and could not find a permanent home for their camping program, and they had more and more demand. We got those groups together and we sat down and we said, what does everybody want in your ideal world? What would everybody want in a camping program? And sort of took off from there.
We're very fortunate to have over 50 partners now and serving thousands of children in multiple sites with all different sorts of illnesses.
Camp Twin Lakes, we are able to take children who have different illnesses and diseases and situations, conditions, and give them a camping experience just like anybody else's, but it takes a lot behind the scenes to make it happen.
Behind the curtain is a hospital, and that changes depending on what the needs of the particular population is.
From adaptive equipment, specialized training for the staff, to the medical staff that come in and really provide a hospital setting for these kids. As you walk around camp, it looks like any camp would. You don't see, the illness first thing. You see kids having fun, which is what it's all about.
We always seek out the finest medical staff in the particular specialty of the camp.
We're able to allow them to maintain their normal lifestyle and function just like a regular normal kid as they would at home, or even more so than they would at home, because they're trying out a lot of new different things here.
Pretty much any activity that you would do inside or outside is at camp, and it's adapted to whatever you need.
Of course, we're working with kids who primarily are patients. That's how they're defined in the rest of their life, is they're a patient. But at camp, they learn that there is a community for them.
Just knowing that I could get away from my normal life and be surrounded for a weekend with a bunch of other kids that have gone through what I've gone through.
I met my best friend at camp back when I was 9 years old. The feeling was amazing, just to know that I could tell somebody, hey, I got sickle cell SS, and they say, oh, I have the same thing.
Camp was always a safe place for me. That's what I tell people a lot of times. I knew that no matter what happened throughout the year, I could always come to camp and everything would be okay. And a lot of kids don't have that. Even as an adult, I still love coming back and just seeing the kids here.
So as an independent nonprofit organization, we rely on the generosity of others to provide our operating funds, and we pay over 80% of what it costs for every camper to come to camp. And most of the campers who come don't pay anything.
We are constantly looking at opportunities to serve more children.
We know that we are just touching a small percentage of kids.
We've gone from one site to 3, and we're frankly filled in all of our summer slots, and slowly during the year when we do a lot of weekend programs, those are filling quickly as well.
The money that you invest here is very tangible and real, and the effect that it has is immediate.
And it takes a whole community to allow these kids to have a great camp experience with other kids just like them.
And so it's a challenge for us as an organization to continue to think outside the box about how can we reach more children and reach them in a deeper way. So hopefully you want to go to camp now. Hopefully that did the trick, or at least you want to give money to camp. That's what that video is for. So when we start talking about collaboration, the first thing we had to do was really look at, and make sure I get the right button. See? University of Georgia. Okay, that's fine. So the first thing we needed to do was really look at what are our core competencies? What are the things that we know that we do well and that are really, really important in this collaboration with a partner? And so we looked at a number of different things, and these are not all of the ones we came up with, but we did decide that, the program, what the kids did at camp, it didn't make sense for our partners who do 1 week of camp a year to really dive really deep into that program. whereas we do it year-round. So it made sense for us to continue to do that and make that a core competency. And within that, we talk about intentional programs. Our programs are all intentional, meaning that there's a goal involved. Those goals are sometimes pretty simple, like building friendships. A lot of the campers that we serve are pretty isolated at home. They're kind of known as I said in the video, kind of known as the kid who uses the wheelchair, or the kid with cancer, or the kid with diabetes. And that's very isolating. But at camp, they're able to be with other children who are facing similar challenges. And so what we find is those skills that we're building are not just things like friendship, which help our kids year round, about independence, about responsibility, but also medication management. Children who come to camp who have diabetes go home most of the time knowing how to administer their own insulin. Children who have sickle cell disease learn more about what triggers the pain crisis. And so we're working hard to understand that and to make sure that we take advantage of it. But we know that the outcomes of camp are really dependent on us. And so the intentional program is one that is a very important to us. And our look, goat. We have animals, so this is good. So the other thing we do really well is program development, creating new programs. This is a program that we started about 5-6 years ago. And it started with just a few raised beds where we planted tomatoes and onions and peppers, and we had chips, and the kids made salsa. It started there, but now has grown to be a 120-acre working farm with 50 head of cattle, goats, milking goats, alpacas. We go to, you see the kids, she's got a chicken. We do all our own eggs at camp. The kids are actually in the garden. They're not just looking at it from afar. They get into the garden and create and get their hands dirty. And again, so creating that kind of program could not fall to one of our partners. It needed to be us that created that. And then, very simply, facilities. We know how to build, to fund, and to maintain buildings. And a couple of the things here that you can see, and you saw in the video the tree house. We built a tree house, and it was designed by a Georgia Tech grad. And it was at the time, this was in 2009 we built this, the treehouse master actually came out and did a story on it for one of his shows. And it's a place for kids to explore, to discover nature, but most importantly is it's accessible by wheelchair. So the kids can go all the way around the nature trail and end in the treehouse no matter what their mobility issues are. We also talk a lot about sustainability at camp. With the farm, it's the perfect opportunity. We have, we compost from our kitchen, so we teach kids about composting. We do all of those kinds of things. We have a solar panel that actually feeds the treehouse. The treehouse has this green roof, which is a key aspect of sort of its greenness, both literally and figuratively. But it basically keeps the building cool. There's not as much runoff from a typical building from a roof, so that's the case. And then just this past year, or year and a half, we opened our new barn at one of our camps with the intention of that will become a year-round riding facility. So these are all things that we realize that Camp Twin Lakes, our staff and our board, we had among others, but these were sort of our core camp competencies. And just to give you a little bit of a history and kind of how we've grown, we started in 1993 with 7 partners. There was a man in the video named Doug Hertz. Doug is the president CEO of United Distributors out of Smyrna. And he was on the board of Camp Sunshine, which is a camp for children with cancer. They were going to a very traditional summer camp up in North Georgia, but were going on the shoulder season. So they weren't getting kind of prime dates. Plus the facilities could not support what those children needed as far as adaptations and medical care, so they couldn't take their most fragile children to that camp. They lost that site. It was the best site they had, but then they lost it because there was a camp being run by the American Lung Association for children with asthma, and they had reserved that spot. So he's like, well, if they reserved that spot, where were they last year? And so they found out where the Camp Breathe Easy was the year before, but the Muscular Dystrophy Association had a camp, and they had already reserved that. So he said, this is stupid. Why are we working against each other? Why don't we build a facility that will meet all of our needs? And really created Camp Twin Lakes almost as a timeshare, where every camp would have, those original 7 partners would have their week of camp. And the idea was Camp Twin Lakes could come, create a group who could manage it, could raise money pretty effectively, thus not passing the entire cost of camp on to the partner organization. So the partner organization would be able to continue doing what they did, which was provide services and support for that specific diagnosis. So anyway, moving forward, so we started 7 partners, 1,200 campers, $1 million budget, and 3 full-time staff. And then today, we're actually 65 partners, 64 as of yesterday, but we had actually signed one on today. This year, we'll serve over 10,000 campers. We have 3 campsites, a $5.2 million budget, and we're able to raise half of that, basically. $2.5 million that we raise that goes to offset what the partner organization pays us. So the partner does pay us to come to camp because we think it's important that they have some skin in the game, that they have some investment. But we have actually just gone up on that fee for the first time in 25 years. There are, and just to give you an idea of kind of the scope of that, the camp costs us about $800 per camper, and we charge the partner $250. So they're able to, we're able to support that $550. And we've begun trying to study our outcomes and seeing what are the benefits of camp. We know anecdotally that there are a lot of benefits, and as Faith mentioned, she holds it near and dear to her heart. We know that our kids learn more about their illness, more about their independence, more about responsibility. So we do some camper outcomes. We do some scoring on partnership and how we collaborate with each other with these 64 different organizations. We also, in how we invest in our leaders. We have a number of leadership programs for campers and former campers and staff. And then simply just our growth in numbers, going from 1,200 to 10,000. In the future, what we would like to do more of, certainly volunteer satisfaction. So the partner organization brings in volunteers who stay in the cabin with the children. And the reason that works really well for us is because instead of me going out and hiring a staff for all summer who it changes, population changes week to week, they are able to recruit volunteers who many times are living with the illness or had the illness as a child or had a family member affected. So they understand it often on a much deeper level than I could ever train someone for. So we love that part of our business, but we also recognize that takes, last summer it was about 2,500 people to take a week of their summer to come to camp. So that's a significant investment of time for those people. And then, volunteer satisfaction, one of the things that we're also looking at is, we rely on volunteer medical staff. And there has been a study is being concluded soon about nurse retention in a children's hospital. And does coming to camp for a week and the hospital allowing the nurses to come to camp for a week, does that help with nurse retention? Which of course is a very big problem for most children's hospitals. Then we also want to look more at the medical outcomes. For a child with sickle cell disease, by coming to camp, does that mean that child's hospitalizations or admissions to the hospital will decline? If so, that's a really significant find that will be easily funded. So it tells lots of different stories. So this gives you an idea of some of the partners that we have. We have, and this is including everything from our, original partners like Camp Sunshine, like Camp Breathe Easy, but also we partner with the state of Georgia in that we manage a site at Willoway, which is in Winder at Fort Yargo State Park, and we manage that site, and we've invested now almost $10 million into that site, but we don't own it. The state of Georgia does, and the most we can get is a 5-year lease. So at any given time, the longest we are guaranteed that spot is 5 years. So we have to really maintain that partnership and that collaboration, and it's challenging. Anytime there's a collaboration, it's challenging, and some of the issues that we've run into are things like role clarity. People get very concerned about, are you going to take my job? Are you going to take my tasks? Are you, those kinds of things. And frankly, as an organization, we have also overstepped some of our role at times and forced some things that we shouldn't have forced. There's also, for us, a significant branding issue. Our brand gets confused with every one of the brands on the screen. We have funders who say, well, I gave to Camp Sunshine, aren't you the same thing? And we have families and parents and others that come to camp and never know that or understand that they're at Camp Twin Lakes. They think they're at Camp Independence or Camp Wanaclot, or all of the camps have their own identity. So we struggle with that. We even have had situations where our staff have really shepherded a grant process through a corporation that where somewhere up the ladder, our name got changed to one of our partners' names. And so they got a really surprising check in the mail that was a significant check, $75,000. And it's like, how do you unwind that? How do you, and so those are the kind of things that for us are a challenge and continue to be a challenge. So what we had to do was really look at how can we measure what a healthy collaboration looks like? What are the things, the features of a healthy collaboration? And so 5 years ago in our second strategic plan, this is really what we looked at. How can we meet our partners where they are, knowing that our partners, there's a wide spectrum from a billion-dollar healthcare organization to a volunteer-driven, under $20,000 budget nonprofit. And how can we meet them all where they are and try to bring all of them up? And for us, I was able to find a number of tools to use, and this one was really the key for us. Because we talk about goals. Are the goals of each organization the same? Or at least are they aligned? We talked about alignment in our vision statement. And what we found is that, and since this time, since 2013, we've actually parted ways with a partner because we realized our goals are not the same. In fact, our goals are incompatible. And we had worked together for 20 years, butting heads, building resentment, and it just came down to the fact that our goals don't match. Your goals aren't bad and ours aren't bad, they're just different. Communication. This is something that anytime in management you'll learn that no matter how much you think you communicate, the perception is going to be that you don't communicate enough. I feel like sometimes I am shoveling information out the door, but then I get people you don't communicate enough. So we really have to make sure that there is open and clear communication, and that there's an established process for that communication. Sustainability. The collaboration, we have another partner who just really has a hard time raising money for their population. They're a small camp for children in foster care. And so they have a really hard time doing that. And for us, sustainability means the partner needs to pay their share. Granted, we don't want any child to not come to camp because they can't afford it, and that's part of our arrangement with our partners. But of course, children in foster care don't pay anything. So we had to figure out how can we make this partnership sustainable and help them, give them the resources they need to be able to build that competency in their organization. Evaluation. We needed to create a process where not only we could evaluate the partners, but the partners could evaluate us and have a good, honest, sometimes uncomfortable conversation about expectations that were met and expectations that were not met. And so that has become an annual conversation for us with all of our partners. The political climate. This is one that I initially thought, well, I'll just take that one out because it doesn't really apply to camp. There's nothing political about camp. It's s'mores and marshmallows. But the fact is, it's very political. And the example I'll use is with two of our partners. There were two partners serving different children. One is a large healthcare organization, and one is a small diagnosis-specific foundation. That small foundation, most of their revenue came from a state contract to test for that condition. Well, the big player bid on that contract, and of course they could do it less expensively, so they got the bid. The smaller group has really struggled with that because it took much of their financing. And so when we talked about partnership and being together, and at one point they had to share camp, did not go well because there was so much animosity on the leadership about the other group that, those are all political things, literally political, at the state capitol type things that are that really affected the children's experience. Resources, and we talked a little bit about sustainability, but resources, having the right resources. The four types of capital: environmental, in-kind, financial, and human. Those are all things that we needed to make sure catalysts. The collaboration was started because of a specific problem that we needed to solve. And does that catalyst still exist? You hear stories about, when Roosevelt was diagnosed with polio, the March of Dimes started. The March of Dimes was there to, kids were raising their dimes and sending their dimes in to combat polio. Well, now that polio is eradicated, it doesn't have the same catalyst. So they had to look at what their mission was and broaden their mission to not just polio, but all birth defects. So that's an example of that catalyst. Policies and regulations, can they be changed? Can they be adapted for each partner? The history, we get into this too. We have partners that we have, and I'll use Camp Sunshine as a great example. Our history with them is long, the longest time we've had a partner. But there's also been some animosity between some of the volunteers and some of the staff, and this, that, and the other, because of different histories, And we still get people still volunteer-based folks still talk about the good old days at the camp that they couldn't take all their kids to, But it was also a time when they would, when they had their evening snack for their camp for their staff, they had a keg of beer because that was okay. It was the 80s. It's like The success of camp back then was if you take 12 children into the woods and you bring 12 children out of the woods, that was success, So connectedness. Members of the collaboration are connected and have established formal and informal communication at all levels. And this was one that really, for us, was an eye-opener because the camp directors, the people on the ground, they communicated all the time, but our executive staff and our board didn't always communicate with the boards of these other organizations. And so we've been very strategic in that to make sure that when we are making a change, when we are doing something that is going to change the experience or change that partner's investment, that partner's responsibilities, we are sure to really communicate that at all levels, not just where the rubber meets the road. Community development, the community was mobilized to address important issues. And the last two, community development and understanding community, are also something that was really, really tough for us. Summer camp, as an industry, is a very middle class, upper class, white privilege. And so, our staff have not always mirrored our communities that we serve. And that's something we work really, really hard on. The issue for us was, and I'll use our sickle cell camp, children, it's African American children and children from the Mediterranean, basically, that are affected by sickle cell disease. And, the perception was, these white folks are taking my kids into the woods. And so we didn't do it well to begin with. We didn't understand the community from which they were coming, and we didn't engage that community. And for us, that was, it completely stopped the progress of that camp because we didn't include them in the planning and in the implementation of it. So we are looking at the next 5 years, and I love this. I don't know if you can read it, but it says, we're all that kid. So I talked about they're always known as the kid with. This is a camp called Camp We Can Eat It for children with celiac disease. And so I love that that's a neat thing to me, resonates. So we look at the next 5 years. We are actually about to undergo our strategic planning process for the next 5 years. And we've got a lot of things we want to look at, growth being the first one. Currently we're at 3 sites, but only 2 of those are full-time. Some of our most beneficial programs are weekends, where the whole family that has a child with a specific diagnosis goes to camp. And so moms get to meet other moms, dads get to meet other dads, siblings get to meet other siblings. I have 2 children, and one is very, very typical 13-year-old. And if anybody would like for her to move in with you, I'm happy with that. And my 10-year-old has a developmental disability. That has affected my older daughter significantly in very positive ways. She is definitely more empathetic. She definitely judges less, but also in more difficult ways socially. She had a concert last night, and we took our Hannah, and Hannah, she was not in the mood for a concert, and so I missed it because I had to step out with Hannah. So those kinds of things. So siblings, it's really great to get them together, to let them know they're not alone, because there's a lot of things going on there. Sorry, I digress. So the next 5 years, there's a lot of things we want to do. One of which is potential, and Jill, who is our CEO, who couldn't be here today, we actually started some conversations with our board just a week ago about our strategic plan and some of the things that we may be looking to. The growth being one of them, new programs. How do we have multiple touch points with campers when the partner organization actually owns, quote unquote, the relationship with the camper? So there's a lot of things we want to do, but the branding piece is one of them. And a lot of times people get confused about, okay, is this Camp Twin Lakes or is this Camp Wannaclot? And even just the physical space. And so one of the ideas that came up was changing our name. Instead of being Camp Twin Lakes, which really is a place, you think of it's a place you go, to Twin Lakes Camps. We have multiple sites. It de-emphasizes camp, so it's more global. And this is not official by any means, and it's just something we're looking at, but would be interested to hear your thoughts on that, because the other thing we love about it is it's TLC, which, we like that. This is, I'm going to wrap up here in a second. We asked our staff what camp meant to them in one word, and this is what they came back with. This is actually staff and volunteers. And to me, I love that hope is the biggest, because we have a lot of kids that deserve to not have hope. And we have a lot of kids year to year that pass away. But to me, if we can live up to this, than we have the responsibility to. And as Camp Twin Lakes has grown and gone from more of a landlord-leasee kind of relationship to being the camp expert and being the camp, the intentional program expert, we realize that also creates an obligation to make sure that every child who comes through our gate receives that transformation and receives that focus from the staff, that connection with each camper, and thereby that transformation into a stronger and more capable kid. We talk a lot about our kids because of what they've faced, because of the obstacles that they've overcome. They really are the people who could be game changers in our society. They're the ones, because they've overcome so much so early in life, that they really could change the world. And all of a sudden our mission goes from taking 12 kids into the woods and bringing 12 kids out of the woods to changing the world. And we try to do that through collaborating with these different partners. With that, questions? Yes, sir.
After 25 years, you heard that, you figured out that your goals were not aligned. What was that process? It took 25 years, so was it a sudden realization? What was that process like?
For me, it was sudden. Because it was a kind of an aha for me. This is a partner that we had really struggled with for a long time. And the difference, the sort of difference in our purpose was they were a respite program. They were not an intentional camping program. Their goal really was just to provide respite. And so as long as their campers were safe-ish, it was okay. The program didn't mean anything. It was really just sort of, anyway, so the process was a long one, and it's funny because we actually, we ended our relationship with them 12 years ago or so, and then they went to the camp that we then took over in the state park. So we sort of got them back, and then we tried really hard to work with them again, and just realized it's the round hole in the square peg, and it's frustrating everybody. So why are we continuing to do it? Yes, sir. Was there?
Yeah, Dan, I'm just curious about managing in a nonprofit organization. I don't know if you have experience or not managing in for-profit organizations, but can you tell the class what you think maybe some of the challenges are managing a nonprofit? A lot of these students are management students, and
yeah,
I think they're probably targeting for-profit businesses, but to understand what the differences are between the two, I think would be
absolutely helpful. My brother is a business owner, and he gives me a lot of grief because he says he's been managing a nonprofit for years. It's just not supposed to be. I think the management issues are very much the same. We're dealing with compliance issues. We're dealing with personnel issues. We're dealing with, and we are a nonprofit. I always joke about on April 15th. That's when we file our tax return. That's when we're a nonprofit. The rest of the time, I'm really concerned with budget. I'm really concerned with staying, within that budget. I'm really concerned with the people management parts of it, which gets more and more complicated the more people you have. In managing those expectations, we now have a staff of about 40, 30 of whom come up under me. And, what I've grown to understand is when I was just directing a camp, I only had 4 or 5 staff, so I could spend a lot of time with them. I can't do that anymore, unfortunately. I end up going where the problems are, and that's, so I don't know that there's really any significant differences. And I've worked in both government and for-profit, but not for long. Yeah, volunteers. So that's one of the things that we talk a lot with our partners about, because we have partners that have tremendous volunteers and that come back year after year after year. But we also have volunteers who come back year after year that probably shouldn't, and are actually having the opposite effect of camp. They're taking away experiences. We have volunteers who come to camp who, are very focused on their experience, not the camper's experience. And so we have to be careful to give the volunteer what they need. To give, and we talk about, volunteers are not paid. Well, they're paid. They're paid with an experience. They're paid with with resume builder, whatever it is. They get something out of the equation, and hopefully that's all positive. But there are times when you have to fire a volunteer, and it just doesn't work. I work with the American Camp Association a lot, and very involved there, and I'm on our national committee for volunteer engagement. And just this morning was on the phone with folks in New Mexico because they had a camp director who was volunteering but just was toxic. And he just was taking that whole area and making people not want to be involved. So we had to intervene and fire a volunteer. And so, you have to think about the motives a little differently. But I'm of the belief that I don't treat them a lot different than I would employees because we set expectations. And then we monitor to make sure those expectations are met. It doesn't matter if you're getting a paycheck at the end of the week or you're not. These are the expectations we have, and we have to be very clear about that in the beginning. And sometimes, we actually try to talk some people out of volunteering because maybe it's not the right fit. So we want to know that they are in it, to be there. So, good question. Yes, ma'am.
What do you do outside the summer, particularly in terms of the leadership development and preparing the next generation of recreational professionals? Great.
So we operate year-round. We have groups at camp 12 months a year. In family camps, teen camps, all of that. We have a lot of our partners that we don't have space for in the summer, so they come on weekends. But we actually developed a program some years ago called our fellowship program, and it's mostly for our summer staff. So we hire summer staff who are there for the 10 weeks, and they often are majoring in things like recreation therapy, nursing, occupational therapy, those kinds of things, to get kind of real experience. And so what we do is we offer a set number of those a fellowship, which is a 1-year appointment after they graduate from college. And through that, we do professional development with them to teach them not only about the business of running camp and how to, management skills and those kinds of things, but also try to expose them to more of the industry. They go to the national conference, they see other camp professionals, they meet other, they work more deeply with our partners and really gain an understanding of the partnership a little bit better. And then we actually have one of our staff member who is really great at creating curriculum around leadership development. So he meets with them on a monthly basis where they go and purely focused on leadership development. And so they read books or they, whatever it is, but they have been very, very involved. The other thing that we really have concentrated on is with our teen programs. And so we do teen programs year-round. And we actually fell into a situation in LJ where we have a remote camping area that's owned by this very philanthropic man. And he built a campground. So you can go and put up tents and really camp, with the wild animals and everything. And so we've started doing more of those kinds of trips with small groups of teens that have a specific diagnosis. So it may be, actually in 2 weeks, it's going to be children, or teens rather, that have an incarcerated parent. So they're going to go, they're going to learn how to cook over a fire, they're going to learn how to put up a tent, all of those things. But again, those are all geared toward leadership development and all geared toward, it's not about putting up the tent. When it becomes about putting up the tent, we've lost it. It's about teamwork and being able to negotiate something new. It's about, the friendship skills. It's about, we always, at dinner, if I take all the macaroni and cheese, somebody around the table is not going to get some, right? So I have a responsibility to the other people who I live with. So, yes, sir.
So I know you guys still have to meet and go through that strategic planning process, but when it comes to growth, what would you say is your take on what your direction would be, and what would you say are the biggest obstacles to that?
So I have to be very honest, I have a board member in the room. But no, we will build a third year-round site. We are looking at some different options for that. So I don't know if it will be in partnership with another organization. We also, at our site in Rutledge, we have 500 acres, so we could build there. The obstacles, I think, financing being one of them. It's going to be a $20 million endeavor. So regardless of what we do, it's going to be a significant capital investment. We also will need to restack sort of where our camps go. And so we have camps, and so we're looking kind of at segmentation of our market. So where, our site in Rutledge is really built well for children with medical issues, because we have a large infirmary, we can do chemotherapy there, there's, plenty of room, all of that. But our site at Willoway is really good for children who've experienced trauma. So kids who are burn victims, kids who are in foster care, so it's built well because you can isolate people a little bit more than our cabins at another, so each camp sort of has its positives and negatives for each population. But we have populations that have been going to the same camp for 25 years. And so I think restacking them and encouraging and pushing and trying to get campers to go to a different, or get camp organizations to go to one of our different sites will be a challenge. But I think it's something that we just have to be able to do all of those things we talked about well to be able to make it happen. Yes, sir.
I have one question, and I'll follow up with a corollary question. So, are all your partners nonprofit organizations?
Yes.
Okay. So, my corollary question to that was, you talked about how sometimes partnerships struggle, right? Because they have different visions, different endeavors when they spend money on you guys. Are they investing in you guys?
It's a good question.
Or are they donating?
Yeah, so beyond what they pay us for the camp experience, the bill we send, and that's something we struggle with because we talk about partners, we talk about collaboration, yet we still send them an invoice, and it's like, and we subsidize it a great deal, but the partners, to them, it's the biggest check that they write, so there's definitely that. But we do have partners who are more established who give to our capital campaigns. We have partners who really want a specific program, and so they'll fund it. And we're seeing more and more of that. And it's less selfish as we go along. So it's less about serving their individual needs, and more they see the benefit of all of the camps being able to benefit from it. So yeah, that's a great question. We actually had a for-profit that came to us that was a pediatric home care agency that wanted to start a camp, but they only wanted it for their patients. And that didn't feel good to us because it was giving them competitive edge. And that's just not what we are about. We're about serving kids. And so we were able to work with them, and we helped them create a nonprofit that could serve all kids, to serve that population of kids. So.
Okay, I have one more thing. Sure. So having like 65 partners, do you feel like it's more like a lot more political, because that's kind of like having like lobbyists trying to like tell you, hey, we'll give you money if you do this.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You have partners competing for you guys to implement
scarce resources, right?
Correct.
So, for us, the biggest issue lately has been the summer weeks. Nobody wants the first week. Nobody wants the last week. Nobody wants July 4th. And I have been, told that I've, been the devil by a number of people, and I was going to ruin their program because they had July 4th. So a number of years ago, I said, I'm not doing this anymore. We're going to get everybody in the room so that they can understand what the process is. And so we had, and people came in, the way they came in, they were ready for a fight. But what happened is we went around the room and they said, I can't have July 4th because I can't get male volunteers to come on July 4th. Well, then the next person would say, I can't have July 4th because I can't get male volunteers. So they started to understand a little bit better. But then one of my dear friends who actually directed one of the camps stood up and said, I'm just going to point this out that I named my child after Dan, but I'm sure that will have no bearing on which week I get. And it's like, oh dear. So, but yeah, often we get, there are those expectations, so it does get very political. And I get calls from board members occasionally saying, hey, this person called me, what's going on, and luckily our board is very, very good and lets us do the operations of camp. But that can often get into a really sticky situation. The other way we have that is when we hire summer staff and we get calls from donors, from foundations saying, hey, this person is a really good kid, they blah blah blah, they show up late to the interview, they're not engaged, it's like, do I have to hire this person? It's those kinds of things. So yeah. So anything else?
If there's not, I'll the question, I was intrigued by the question about all your partnerships being with nonprofits, but you also have a lot of relationships with for-profit organizations that are actually necessary for
absolutely.
The functioning. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, and I'll use United Distributors as our first key kind of relationship. And truly they're partners because it's not, when we started doing all of this around our partnerships, we started looking at not just looking at corporations as funders, but how can we engage corporations and engage employees? And so just today, Cumulus Radio, we have a board member who's with Cumulus, and they sent out 50 of their staff, and they worked at camp. They did a work day at camp. So they were cleaning cabins and doing, so for them it's a great morale builder. It's a great, kind of esprit de corps kind of moment. And it allows us to get things done that we couldn't get done otherwise potentially. And so we have these long-going relationships with a number of corporations around town, from United being obvious because Doug was our founder, and so every summer we have his folks come through and get to have a little camp experience. And I'll tell you, in the last when we hit the recession, that was something that was really valuable that our development team did. That I don't know that anybody in development thought of at the time, but it was. They started reaching out to our donors, particularly corporations, saying, I know things are hard right now, and we're not calling for an ask, but we're calling to say, what can we do for you? Can we help you sponsor a day at camp for your staff? And all you have to do is pay for dinner, or lunch, or whatever it is. And so starting to see that reciprocity in the relationship, and again, it becomes a relationship, not just a one-time ask. So you're nurturing that the whole way along. And we've had amazing gifts. Cumulus Radio, I don't know, many of you, they've got 6 stations here in Atlanta, and they ran a great campaign around the holidays that featured us and had some of our campers talking about their stories. And, that's something we couldn't pay for. So there are those corporate relationships that do amazing things. Taco Mac really helped us start our farm. We were able to, they gave 50 cents for every kid's meal that they served. And they thought, oh, we'll give $8,000 or $10,000. But, with that campaign, they brought in about $30,000. So, and it adds to their brand. They become, allies of Camp Twin Lakes. And it gives them an opportunity to freshen up their brand and show positive things about their organization. Yes, sir. Ma'am, I'm sorry, I can't see.
Hi. Can you talk a little bit about like what the process was to like gather these partners? Like, how would you approach them, or how would they approach you? Like, whether
Absolutely.
it be nonprofits or for-profits?
Sure. So originally the 7, they were already doing 1-week camps. And so they were already sort of in existence. And so it was just a matter of sort of getting them in the room. The way that we have approached it since then is really, existing organizations is sort of one bucket. And so it's organizations that serve a specific need that we know that camp could benefit them. So a lot of times it's just sort of courting them. I've got a number of groups that I call every 3 months or so, just, hey, we're here. I'd love to come show you camp and show you what we do and, that kind of thing. But we've even taken steps like with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, where we actually for 5 years funded a position at Children's to be able to create camps. And we created 9 different camps through that with the intention and the eventuality of it of Children's taking over those camps and running those camps and being the partner. So we're committed to always working with a partner, but there are times when we find populations that are not being served or that are being underserved by the current partner. And so we've gone to develop new partnerships and new organizations that are independent from us. We approach it from a lot of different ways. One of the things too we found is a lot of our partner organizations didn't have the camp expertise, so they didn't have people who could direct camp. And literally the Lung Association, they would sit around their, staff meeting and, the last person to put their thumb on the desk had to direct camp that summer, and so, it might be the bookkeeper, it might be, so what we now do, and something we've created in our organization is we continue to work with partners, but we wanted to be able to vertically integrate when we could help partners. So we have a team of professionals who direct camps for partners. And so they're still the partner. And so they still interact with our team the same way, but they're sort of in our team. So we've looked at that partnership a lot of different ways and continue to reach out to organizations. And we get a lot of suggestions, a lot of groups that we want to work with, but they just don't have the capacity right now. But we're trying to continue to grow those partners. And some of our partners do a weekend, 1 weekend, and that's it. So they range in scope and size.
So maybe I'll ask one last question. Thanks for coming here again.
My pleasure.
And we've got a lot of very involved, engaged Georgia Tech students here. How can Georgia Tech students help and support Camp Twin Lakes?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that question. I mentioned about our 2,500 volunteers that we need every summer to dedicate a week at camp. We know that's a big commitment. We know that's a big, a lengthy period of time. So if you can't do that, there are other ways to volunteer with us. We do fundraising events. We do all sorts of different events to raise money, to raise awareness. We've actually worked with the students here in the past in helping us develop things like a diversity plan, help us develop things like our horseback riding plan. So doing some class work, research and those kinds of things have been very valuable for us. And then our office is actually just up Spring Street. And so, if you're interested in learning more about marketing, learning about nonprofit management, learning about, if you're interested in doing that and interning or even just visiting, we would be happy to show you not only our office, but also out at camp. And just my email is hopefully pretty easy to remember. My name's Dan, and my email is just dan@camptwinlakes.org. So please email me, and I can get you in contact with the right person. And we do a lot of weekend camps, as I mentioned, and those often need volunteers. So if you have a specific population you're interested in, we can help guide you to the right partner as well.
So thank you for being here, and let's give a final round of applause.
Thank you.